The widow's hammer struck the fence post with a sharp crack that echoed across the empty Wyoming grassland, and she knew without looking up that someone was watching her from the ridge above. Beatrice Zimmerman had learned to sense such things in the 3 years since Thomas had died. Left alone on this remote ranch 15 miles south of Delta with nothing but her cattle, her land, and the constant work that kept her from thinking too much about the lonely nights. The morning sun of June 1882 was already fierce against her back, and sweat dampened the collar of her work dress as she positioned another weathered board against the listing fence post. Her hands, once soft and pale, now bore the calluses and small scars of ranch work, though she was only 26 years old and could remember when her biggest concern had been which ribbon to wear in her hair. The sound of hoofbeats made her straighten, one hand instinctively moving to shade her eyes as she looked toward the approaching rider. He sat tall in the saddle, his silhouette dark against the bright sky, and as he drew closer, she could make out the details of a man perhaps 30 years of age, lean and weathered by sun and wind, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of a winter sky. He wore the practical clothing of a working cowboy, his hat pulled low, and he rode with the easy confidence of someone who had spent more time on horseback than on his own 2 feet. "Morning, madam," he called out as he reined in his bay, gelding a respectful distance away. His voice was low and pleasant, with a trace of southern drawl that spoke of origins far from Wyoming territory. "Name is Andrew Turner. I was passing through and saw you working out here alone. That is a 2-person job at least, mending fence line like that." Beatrice set down her hammer and wiped her palms on her apron, studying him with the careful assessment she had learned to apply to strangers. "I have managed alone this long. I can manage today." "I do not doubt it," Andrew said, and she caught something in his tone that was not pity or condescension but simple respect. "But managing alone and having help are 2 different things. If you would allow it, I would be happy to lend a hand. No charge, no expectation. Just seems wrong to ride past when I can see you could use another pair of hands." "I cannot pay you," Beatrice said bluntly. "If that is what you are angling for, you should ride on to one of the bigger spreads. They hire seasonal help." Andrew swung down from his saddle with fluid grace, and she noticed he moved with a slight favor of his left leg, as though an old injury still bothered him on occasion. "I said no charge. I meant it. Truth is, my horse could use some rest and water, and I would not mind stretching my legs on solid ground for a spell. If helping you mend your fence line accomplishes that, seems like we both benefit." There was something in his honest, open expression that made Beatrice want to trust him, though she had learned caution in the years since Thomas had been thrown from his horse and broken his neck, leaving her alone with a ranch to run and creditors circling like vultures. Still, the fence line stretched for another 1/4 mile at least, and the work that would take her 3 days might be accomplished in one with help. "All right," she said finally. "Water trough is by the barn. Your horse can rest in the shade there. There are extra work gloves in the tool shed if you need them." "Obliged, madam." Andrew touched the brim of his hat and led his horse toward the barn, giving Beatrice a moment to collect herself and wonder what she had just agreed to. When he returned 10 minutes later, he had removed his coat and rolled up his shirt sleeves, revealing forearms corded with muscle and tanned dark from long days in the sun. He picked up the post-hole digger without being told what to do, examined the fence line with a practiced eye, and began work on the next section that needed repair. They worked in silence for a time, falling into an easy rhythm that surprised Beatrice with its naturalness. Andrew seemed to know instinctively what needed doing, and he moved with the efficient economy of motion that came from years of hard work. "You have done this before," Beatrice observed as they fitted a new post into place. "Growing up in Texas, you learned fence work early," Andrew said. "My father had a small spread outside of San Antonio. Nothing fancy, but enough to keep 3 boys busy from dawn to dusk." He smiled slightly, an expression that softened the hard lines of his face. "I was the middle one. Always trying to keep up with my older brother, always trying to stay ahead of my younger one." "Was?" Beatrice asked, then immediately regretted the question when she saw the shadow that crossed his features. "They are gone now," Andrew said quietly. "Fever took my mother and younger brother in '77. My father died the following year. I think his heart just gave up. My older brother sold the ranch and moved to California. I have been drifting since, working ranches from Texas to Montana, never staying too long in one place." "I am sorry for your losses," Beatrice said, and meant it. She knew the weight of grief, the way it could settle into your bones and change the very shape of your days. "And your husband?" Andrew asked gently. "Forgive me for being forward, but I noticed the ring on your finger and the way you said you have been managing alone." Beatrice looked down at the thin gold band she still wore. 3 years ago, his horse spooked during a storm and threw him. He hit his head on a rock. He was gone before I could even get to him. The words came easier now than they once had, worn smooth by repetition like river stones. "We had only been married 2 years. We were going to have children, build up the herd, maybe add onto the house. We had plans." "Plans are fragile things," Andrew said. "I learned that the hard way." They continued working, and as the sun climbed higher in the sky, Beatrice found herself talking more freely than she had in months. Andrew was an easy listener, asking questions that showed genuine interest, sharing his own stories in turn. He spoke of the ranches he had worked, the hard winters in Montana and the scorching summers in Texas, the characters he had known and the places he had seen. His voice held a note of loneliness that matched her own, and she realized they were both adrift in their own ways, both trying to find solid ground in a world that had shifted beneath their feet. By midday, they had completed half the fence line, and Beatrice called a halt for dinner. "It is not much," she warned as they walked back toward the small ranch house. "Just bread and cold chicken and some preserved vegetables from last year's garden." "Sounds like a feast to me," Andrew said. "I have been living on jerky and hardtack for the better part of a week." The house was simple but well kept. 2 rooms downstairs and a sleeping loft above, with a stone fireplace that Thomas had built with his own hands. Beatrice felt suddenly self-conscious about inviting a strange man into her home, aware of how long she had been alone. But Andrew maintained a respectful distance and did not presume any familiarity. They ate at the rough-hewn table, and Beatrice was surprised to find how pleasant it was to share a meal with someone, to hear another voice in the quiet house. "This is good land," Andrew observed, looking out the window at the rolling grassland. "Good water, decent graze. You have a nice little operation here." "It could be better," Beatrice admitted. "I have 40 head of cattle, but I should have twice that to make the ranch properly profitable. I lost some to a hard winter 2 years back, and I have not been able to build the herd back up." "There is only so much one person can do. You ever think about selling?" Andrew asked carefully. Beatrice stiffened. "No, this is my home. Thomas and I built this together. I will not let it go just because things are difficult." "I meant no offense," Andrew said quickly. "I admire your determination. Most people would have given up by now." "I am not most people," Beatrice said firmly, then softened slightly. "I apologize for snapping. It is just that I have had offers. Some of the neighboring ranchers think a woman has no business trying to run a spread alone. They make their opinions known at every opportunity. Their opinions are worth about as much as a bucket with a hole in it, Andrew said, and there was an edge of anger in his voice that surprised her. I have worked for plenty of men who did not have half your grit or sense. Being a man does not make you capable, any more than being a woman makes you incapable. Beatrice felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words, a feeling she had almost forgotten. "Thank you," she said quietly. They returned to work on the fence line after dinner, and by late afternoon they had completed the entire section that had needed repair. Andrew insisted on checking the rest of the boundary fence as well, finding and fixing several weak spots that Beatrice had not yet noticed. The sun was sinking toward the western horizon when they finally finished, painting the grassland in shades of gold and amber. "I cannot thank you enough," Beatrice said as they walked back to the barn where Andrew's horse waited. "That would have taken me most of a week on my own." "It was my pleasure," Andrew said, and she could tell he meant it. He collected his horse and led the animal out into the yard, then hesitated, one hand on the saddle horn. "Madam, I know this is forward of me, and you are welcome to tell me to mind my own business, but I find myself reluctant to ride away. Not because of the work, though that was satisfying enough, but because I enjoyed your company. I have not had a proper conversation in longer than I can remember, and you are easy to talk to." Beatrice felt her heart beat faster, a sensation she had not experienced since Thomas had courted her back in Missouri, before they had headed west together. "I enjoyed your company as well," she admitted. "It has been lonely here." "I was thinking," Andrew said slowly, choosing his words with care, "that if you needed help around the ranch, I could stay on for a spell. I am good with cattle, decent with horses, and I can fix just about anything that breaks. I would not expect much in the way of wages. Just room and board would suit me fine if you have a spare corner somewhere." "I have the bunkhouse," Beatrice said before she could second-guess herself. "It is small, but it is weatherproof and has a stove. Thomas built it thinking we would hire help someday. It has been empty since he died." "That would do just fine," Andrew said, and his smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. The decision made, they set about making the bunkhouse habitable. It needed cleaning and airing out, but the structure was sound, and by nightfall, Andrew had moved his few possessions in and pronounced it more comfortable than many places he had slept in recent years. Beatrice cooked a proper supper of beef stew and biscuits, and they ate together on the porch as the stars began to emerge overhead, talking about the work that needed doing and the plans for the ranch. In the weeks that followed, Beatrice marveled at how quickly Andrew became an essential part of the ranch's operations. He rose before dawn and worked until after dusk, never complaining, always finding things that needed attention. He repaired the sagging barn roof, reinforced the corral gates, and spent long days riding the range to check on the cattle. Under his care, the ranch began to take on a new vitality, the signs of neglect slowly giving way to evidence of proper maintenance. But it was more than just the work that made his presence valuable. Beatrice found herself looking forward to their meals together, to the easy conversations that ranged from practical matters to deeper topics. Andrew had a sharp mind and a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh in ways she had almost forgotten. He treated her as an equal partner in the ranch's operation, asking her opinion and respecting her decisions, never assuming he knew better simply because he was a man. As summer deepened into July, Beatrice realized she was falling in love with Andrew Turner, and the realization both thrilled and terrified her. She had loved Thomas with the innocent devotion of youth, but this feeling was different built on mutual respect and understanding rather than romantic idealism. She caught herself watching Andrew as he worked, admiring the strength in his movements, the concentration on his face. She noticed the small kindnesses he showed her, the way he always made sure she had enough firewood stacked by the door, the way he saved her the choicest bits of meat when they butchered a steer. One evening in late July, as they sat on the porch after supper, Andrew suddenly spoke. "Beatrice, I need to tell you something." The serious tone in his voice made her tense. "What is it?" "When I first rode up here back in June, I told you I was just passing through," Andrew said, staring out at the darkening landscape. "That was true enough, but it was not the whole truth. I was running from something. Not the law," he added quickly, seeing her expression. "Nothing like that. I was running from loneliness, from the feeling that I did not belong anywhere or to anyone. I have been running for 5 years, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots, always telling myself I was looking for something better." He turned to face her, and in the fading light his eyes were intense. "But these past weeks here with you, I have realized something. I was not looking for something better. I was looking for home, and I found it here not because of the land or the work, but because of you." Beatrice's breath caught in her throat. "Andrew, let me finish," he said gently. "I know it has only been a few weeks. I know it might seem too soon, too sudden. But I am 30 years old and I have seen enough of life to know when something is real. What I feel for you is real, Beatrice. I want to stay here, not as hired help, but as your partner, your husband if you would have me. I want to help you build this ranch into something great. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to give you the life and the family you dreamed of having." Beatrice felt tears prick her eyes. "I thought I would never feel this way again," she whispered. "After Thomas died, I thought that part of my life was over. I was resigned to being alone, to just surviving day by day. But then you rode up that morning and everything changed." She reached out and took his hand, feeling the calluses that matched her own, the warmth and strength of his grip. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I will marry you. Yes, I want to build a life with you. Yes to all of it." Andrew pulled her into his arms, and when he kissed her, it was with a tenderness and passion that made her feel alive in ways she had forgotten were possible. They sat together on the porch long into the night, making plans and dreaming dreams, two lonely souls who had found each other against all odds. They were married in Delta 3 weeks later, a simple ceremony at the small church with the Methodist minister presiding and a handful of townspeople serving as witnesses. Beatrice wore her best dress, a blue calico that brought out the color of her eyes, and Andrew bought a new shirt for the occasion, though he refused to abandon his well-worn boots. The minister's wife played hymns on the slightly out-of-tune piano, and when Andrew slipped a gold ring onto Beatrice's finger, she felt a completeness she had never expected to experience again. The neighboring ranchers, who had been so quick to offer their condescending advice about what she should do with her property, were conspicuously absent from the celebration. But Beatrice did not care. She had Andrew, and that was enough. They spent their wedding night in the ranch house, and in the morning they began their life together in earnest. Two people united not just by love but by common purpose and shared determination. The ranch began to thrive under their combined efforts. Andrew used his savings to buy breeding stock, and by fall they had increased their herd to 60 head. He proved to have a natural skill with horses, and word spread that Turner Ranch, as it was now known, was the place to go for well-trained mounts. Beatrice managed the finances and dealt with the merchants in town, her sharp mind for numbers ensuring they always got fair prices for their goods. But their life together was not without challenges. In September, A band of rustlers hit several ranches in the area, and Beatrice and Andrew spent 3 nervous nights taking turns standing watch, rifles at the ready. The rustlers never came to their property, perhaps discouraged by the evidence of vigilance, but the incident reminded them of the dangers that still existed in Wyoming territory. Then in October, the first snow came early and hard, a blizzard that lasted 3 days and left drifts 6 feet high in places. Beatrice and Andrew worked themselves to exhaustion breaking ice on the water troughs and carrying hay to the cattle trapped in the lee of the hills. They lost 2 calves to the cold, but the rest of the herd survived, a testament to their preparation and dedication. Through it all, their love for each other only deepened. Beatrice had worried that the daily reality of marriage might dull the romance. But instead, she found that shared hardship and cooperation made her feelings for Andrew even stronger. She loved the way he looked at her across the dinner table after a long day, as though she were the most beautiful woman in the world despite her work-worn clothes and wind-chapped skin. She loved the sound of his voice in the darkness as they lay together, talking about everything and nothing. She loved the way he touched her, with a combination of desire and reverence that made her feel both wanted and cherished. Winter settled in for real in November, and they spent the long evenings by the fire. Andrew carving wooden toys for the children they hoped to have, and Beatrice working on a quilt from scraps of fabric. They read aloud to each other from the few books they owned, argued good-naturedly about politics and philosophy, and made love with a passion that never seemed to diminish. By December, Beatrice suspected she was pregnant, and a visit to the doctor in Delta confirmed her hopes. She told Andrew on Christmas Eve, giving him the news as a present, and the joy on his face was something she would remember for the rest of her life. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing, then set her down gently as though she were made of spun glass. "A baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Beatrice asked, though she could see the answer in his eyes. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Andrew said. 6 months ago I was alone, drifting, convinced I would never have a real home or family. Now I have a wife I love more than life itself, a ranch we built together, and a child on the way. I feel like the richest man in Wyoming." The winter passed slowly but not unpleasantly. Andrew became almost comically protective, insisting that Beatrice avoid heavy lifting and rest more often. She found his concern both touching and occasionally exasperating, but she indulged him because she knew it came from love. They spent the cold months preparing for the baby, turning the small room off the main bedroom into a nursery. Andrew built a beautiful cradle from pine wood, sanding it smooth and carving a simple pattern of stars along the edges. Spring came late in 1883, but when it finally arrived, it brought a sense of renewal and promise. The grass turned green, the cattle calved successfully, and Beatrice's pregnancy progressed without complication. In late April, when the wildflowers were blooming across the prairie, she went into labor. Andrew rode like a madman to fetch the doctor from Delta, returning with both the physician and his wife, who served as midwife. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next morning. Andrew waited in the main room, pacing like a caged animal, while the doctor and his wife attended Beatrice. Every cry of pain from behind the closed door made him flinch, and more than once he started to barge in, only to be turned back by the doctor's firm instructions to stay out of the way. Finally, as the sun climbed toward noon, a thin wail emerged from the bedroom and Andrew's heart seemed to stop. The doctor opened the door, smiling. "Congratulations, Mr. Turner. You have a son, a healthy boy with good lungs, as you can hear, and your wife is tired but well. You can come in now." Andrew entered the room on trembling legs. Beatrice lay in the bed, pale and exhausted, her hair damp with sweat. But she was smiling, and in her arms she held a small bundle wrapped in blankets. Andrew approached slowly, almost afraid, and looked down at his son for the first time. The baby was red-faced and wrinkled, with a wisp of dark hair and tiny fists waving in the air. His eyes were squeezed shut as he cried, and Andrew felt his heart expand in his chest until he thought it might burst. He sat carefully on the edge of the bed and reached out one finger to touch his son's impossibly small hand. The baby's fingers closed reflexively around his, and Andrew felt tears run down his face. "He is perfect," he whispered. "Beatrice, he is absolutely perfect." "Would you like to hold him?" Beatrice asked, her voice hoarse but happy. Andrew accepted the precious burden carefully, cradling his son against his chest. The baby quieted at the change, his cries fading to small snuffling sounds. Andrew looked down at the tiny face and felt a fierce surge of protective love unlike anything he had ever experienced. "Hello, little one," he murmured. "I am your father. I promise I will always keep you safe. I promise I will always love you and your mother. I promise I will teach you everything I know and help you grow into a good man. What should we name him?" Beatrice asked, reaching out to touch the baby's head. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy, but now Andrew knew with certainty what he wanted to call his son. "Thomas," he said, looking at Beatrice. "Thomas Andrew Turner, if that sits well with you. To honor the man who came before me, who loved you and gave you a home here. Our son should carry his name forward." Beatrice's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of joy and gratitude. "Thomas Andrew Turner," she repeated. "Yes, that is perfect." The doctor and his wife stayed until the next morning to ensure both mother and baby were doing well, then returned to Delta with Andrew's profuse thanks and a generous payment. Beatrice recovered quickly, her strength returning day by day, and little Thomas proved to be a relatively easy baby, sleeping well and eating enthusiastically. The months that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and constant work, but they were also some of the happiest of Beatrice and Andrew's lives. They took turns caring for Thomas, and Andrew proved to be a devoted father, singing to his son in a soft voice and walking the floor with him when he fussed. Beatrice would wake in the night to find Andrew standing by the cradle, just watching their son sleep, a look of wonder on his face. The ranch continued to prosper. Word of mouth brought more customers for their horses, and they made a tidy profit selling well-trained mounts to other ranchers and to the cavalry post 50 miles north. They hired a young man from town to help with the heavy work, giving Andrew more time to spend with his growing family. Thomas grew into a sturdy, curious toddler with his mother's determination and his father's easy smile. By the time he was 2 years old, he was following Andrew everywhere, his short legs working double time to keep up with his father's long strides. Andrew made him a small wooden horse that became his favorite toy, and he would spend hours arranging his toy in elaborate scenarios, chattering away in his own private language. In the spring of 1885, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant again. This time the news was expected but no less joyful, and Andrew's protective tendencies went into overdrive. Thomas, now 2.5, seemed to sense that something important was happening, and he became even more attached to his mother, patting her growing belly with gentle hands. The second pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because Beatrice knew what to expect. She continued working as much as she was able, though Andrew and their hired man insisted on doing the heavier tasks. In September, She gave birth to a daughter they named Margaret Rose, a tiny girl with a shock of blonde hair and her father's blue-gray eyes. Thomas was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything from changing her swaddling cloths to singing her to sleep. Andrew watched his children together with a sense of deep contentment, marveling at how much his life had changed in just 3 years. The ranch grew along with their family. By 1886, they had 100 head of cattle and a reputation for breeding quality horses that extended across Wyoming territory and into neighboring states. They built an addition onto the house, adding 2 more bedrooms and a proper dining room. Andrew hired 2 permanent hands to help with the daily work, and Beatrice managed a growing household with efficiency and grace. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The children grew healthy and strong, the ranch prospered, and Beatrice and Andrew's love for each other continued to deepen. They faced the normal challenges of ranching life: drought years and hard winters, sick animals and broken equipment, but they faced them together, and that made all the difference. One evening in the summer of 1887, as they sat on the porch watching Thomas and Margaret play in the yard, Beatrice leaned against Andrew's shoulder and sighed with contentment. "What are you thinking about?" Andrew asked, his arm around her waist. "I was thinking about that morning 5 years ago when you rode up while I was mending fences," Beatrice said. "I was so alone then, so tired and hopeless. I thought my life would always be nothing but work and loneliness. And now," Andrew prompted, "now I have everything I ever dreamed of and more than I ever dared to hope for," Beatrice said. "A husband who loves me, beautiful children, a thriving ranch. Sometimes I am afraid I will wake up and find it was all a dream." Andrew pulled her closer. "It is no dream. This is real, solid, permanent. We built this together, Beatrice. You and me working side by side, just like that first day mending the fence line. You said you wanted to help forever," Beatrice remembered. "You said let me help forever when you offered to work that day." "I did not realize how literally I meant it at the time," Andrew admitted. "But looking back, I think some part of me knew even then. I took one look at you, strong and determined and beautiful in your work clothes with a hammer in your hand, and something just clicked into place. I knew I had found what I had been searching for, even if I could not put words to it yet." "I felt something too," Beatrice confessed. "I tried to tell myself it was just gratitude for the help or relief at having another person around. But the truth is, I was attracted to you from the first moment. Your kindness, your respectfulness, the way you treated me as an equal. I had not felt anything like that since Thomas died, and it scared me." "Are you still scared?" Andrew asked. "Not anymore," Beatrice said. "Now I am just grateful. Grateful that you rode up that day. Grateful that you stayed. Grateful for every moment we have had together and every moment still to come." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank lower, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Thomas had convinced Margaret to play horses with him, and she was toddling around the yard while he pranced beside her, neighing enthusiastically. The sound of their laughter drifted across the evening air, sweet and pure. "We should have more children," Andrew said suddenly. "As many as we are blessed with. I want to fill this house with love and laughter." Beatrice smiled. "I would like that, though perhaps we could space them out a bit more. Having 2 babies in 3 years was exhausting." "Whatever you want," Andrew said, kissing the top of her head. "You are the one doing the hard work of carrying and birthing them. I am just along for the pleasant parts." "The pleasant parts," Beatrice repeated with a laugh. "Is that what we are calling it now?" They laughed together, and Andrew thought about how much he loved her laugh, how it transformed her entire face and made her eyes sparkle. He thought about how lucky he was, how easily his life could have gone differently. If he had ridden a different route that June morning in 1882, if he had decided not to stop when he saw the woman working alone, if he had moved on after that first day instead of asking to stay, where would he be now? Probably still drifting, still lonely, still searching for something he could not name. Instead, he had everything. A wife he adored, children who filled his days with joy, a ranch they had built together through hard work and determination. He had a purpose, a place to belong, roots that went deep into the Wyoming soil. He had a future to look forward to instead of a past to run from. As darkness fell, they called the children inside for supper. Thomas chattered nonstop about the adventures he and his sister had experienced in the yard, his imagination turning their simple games into epic quests. Margaret, at nearly 2 years old, mostly just banged on the table with her spoon and giggled, but her happiness was no less genuine. After the children were bathed and put to bed, Beatrice and Andrew cleaned up the kitchen together, moving around each other with the practiced ease of long partnership. When the work was done, they stepped outside for a final look at the night sky. The stars were brilliant overhead, countless points of light scattered across the velvet darkness. "Make a wish," Beatrice said, pointing to a shooting star. "I do not need to wish for anything," Andrew said. "I already have everything I want." "Wish anyway," Beatrice insisted. "For the children. For the ranch. For us." Andrew closed his eyes obediently. "I wish for long life and good health for all of us. I wish for our children to grow up happy and strong. I wish for this ranch to continue thriving. And I wish for you and me to grow old together, still working side by side, still in love after 50 years as much as we are right now." "That is a good wish," Beatrice said. "I wish for the same things." They stood together under the stars, holding hands, and Andrew felt a sense of peace so profound it was almost overwhelming. This was what happiness felt like, he realized. Not the wild, giddy excitement of new love, though they had experienced that too. But this deeper, richer satisfaction of building something lasting, of being part of something bigger than yourself, of having someone to share both burdens and joys. The years continued to roll by, each one bringing its own challenges and triumphs. In 1888, Beatrice gave birth to another son, whom they named Samuel James. He was a quiet baby, content to watch the world with solemn eyes, so different from Thomas's energetic curiosity that they joked he must take after some distant relative neither of them knew about. Thomas, now 5 years old, took his role as big brother seriously, helping to look after both Margaret and little Samuel. He had Andrew's way with animals, and by age 6 he was helping to gentle the young horses, his small hands fearless and sure. Margaret proved to have her mother's head for numbers, and she would sit at the kitchen table working sums in her slate, while other children her age were still learning their letters. The ranch continued to expand. They bought additional land from a neighboring rancher who decided to try his luck in the gold fields of Montana, adding another 160 acres to their holdings. Andrew built a larger barn and improved the irrigation system, ensuring they could support a bigger herd even in dry years. Beatrice kept meticulous records of bloodlines and sales, building a reputation for honest dealing that made Turner Ranch a respected name throughout the territory. In 1889, Andrew was elected to serve on the school board in Delta, a mark of how far he had come from the drifting cowboy he had once been. He took the responsibility seriously, using his position to advocate for better education for all children in the district, regardless of their parents' wealth or social standing. Beatrice was proud of him, watching him grow into a pillar of the community. That same year, they celebrated their 7th wedding anniversary with a special trip to Delta. leaving the children in the care of their trusted hired hands for a rare night alone. They had dinner at the hotel restaurant, a luxury they rarely indulged in, and danced to music provided by a traveling musician passing through town. Beatrice wore a new dress she had made especially for the occasion, and Andrew told her she looked even more beautiful than she had on their wedding day. "That is a lie, but a sweet one," Beatrice said, laughing. "I am 33 years old and have borne 3 children. I am not the same woman you married." "You are right," Andrew said, pulling her close as they danced. "You are even better. You are stronger, wiser, more confident. You are the mother of my children and my partner in everything. How could I not find you more beautiful now than ever before?" Later, in the privacy of their hotel room, they made love with the unhurried passion of long familiarity, taking time to savor each touch and kiss. Afterward, lying tangled together in the sheets, Beatrice traced the scars on Andrew's chest, old marks from his days of hard living before they met. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Stopping here, giving up your freedom to settle down?" "Not for 1 second," Andrew said without hesitation. "My so-called freedom was just another word for being lost and alone. Here with you I found something worth staying for. I found home. I found love. I found myself, the man I was always meant to be." "I worried at first that you would get restless," Beatrice admitted, "that after a few months or a year you would want to move on. I had nightmares about waking up one morning and finding you gone." "Never," Andrew said fiercely. "I meant what I said that first day, Beatrice. I am here to help forever. I am yours forever. Nothing could make me leave you, not wanderlust or hardship or anything else this world might throw at us." They fell asleep in each other's arms, and in the morning they returned to the ranch refreshed and recommitted to the life they had built together. The 1890s brought new challenges as Wyoming transitioned from territory to statehood. There were debates about land rights and water usage, tensions between the big cattle operations and smaller independent ranchers like the Turners. Andrew found himself drawn into local politics, despite his natural preference for staying out of such matters, because he believed in standing up for what was right even when it was difficult. There was a particularly tense period in 1892, when range wars threatened to spill over into violence. Some of the big ranchers from back east brought in hired guns to intimidate small operators they suspected of rustling. And for a few weeks, it seemed the whole territory might explode into conflict. Andrew joined with other independent ranchers to stand firm against the intimidation, and Beatrice spent several sleepless nights worrying that her husband might not come home. But Andrew's reputation for fairness and his skills as a negotiator helped diffuse the situation before anyone was seriously hurt. He brokered a compromise that satisfied most parties, establishing clearer boundaries and accountability while protecting the rights of smaller ranchers. The experience left him exhausted and more aware than ever of how precious peace was, but it also cemented his status as a leader in the community. Through all the external turmoil, the Turner family remained a haven of stability and love. The children grew and flourished, each developing their own distinct personalities. Thomas became a skilled horseman and loved working the ranch, already talking about taking over the operation someday. Margaret showed an unexpected talent for drawing and painting, covering every available scrap of paper with sketches of horses and landscapes. Samuel, quiet and thoughtful, loved to read and would spend hours absorbed in books, dreaming of far-off places even as he remained devoted to his family and home. In 1894, Beatrice gave birth to their 4th and final child, a daughter they named Rose Elizabeth. She arrived in the early morning hours of a spring day, with the meadowlarks singing and the wildflowers blooming across the prairie. At 38, Beatrice had worried that the pregnancy would be more difficult, but Rose came quickly and easily, as though eager to join the boisterous Turner clan. Andrew, now 42, held his youngest daughter with the same wonder he had experienced with his first child. "She is beautiful," he whispered, looking from Rose to Beatrice. "Just like her mother." "We make beautiful children together," Beatrice said, exhausted but happy. "Though I think I am done now. 4 is a good number." "4 is perfect," Andrew agreed. "We have been blessed beyond measure." The older children adored their baby sister. Thomas, now 12, was surprisingly gentle with her, and Margaret, at 9, immediately appointed herself as Rose's special guardian. Even Samuel, at 6, would sit by the cradle and read stories to Rose in his serious voice, though she was far too young to understand the words. As the century drew to a close, the Turner Ranch was firmly established as one of the most successful and respected operations in Wyoming. They had weathered droughts and harsh winters, economic downturns and social upheavals, always emerging stronger because they faced every challenge together. The children were growing into capable, kind young people, a reflection of their parents' values and love. One evening in the summer of 1899, as they celebrated their 17th wedding anniversary, Andrew and Beatrice sat on the porch much as they had so many times before, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. The children were inside, Thomas helping Margaret and Samuel clean up after supper while Rose played with her toys in the corner. 17 years, Beatrice marveled. "It seems like no time at all, and yet I can barely remember what life was like before you." "I cannot remember," Andrew said. "Or rather, I do not want to. Those years before I met you seem like a different life, like they happened to someone else. My real life began the day I rode up and saw you mending fences alone." "And you said you would help forever," Beatrice finished, the words worn smooth by repetition but still meaningful. "Best decision I ever made," Andrew said. "You know, sometimes I think about the series of choices and chances that brought me to you that day. If I had taken a different trail, accepted a job at one of the other ranches I passed, stopped in a different town, we might never have met. It seems impossible that our happiness together depended on such random chance." "Maybe it was not chance," Beatrice suggested. "Maybe it was fate or providence or whatever you want to call it. Maybe we were always meant to find each other." "I like that idea," Andrew said. "It makes the universe seem less random and more purposeful." They sat in companionable silence, listening to the sounds of their children inside, the lowing of cattle in the distance, the whisper of wind through the grass. This was their kingdom, Andrew thought, this small corner of Wyoming that they had made their own through sweat and determination and love. Not a grand empire of wealth and power, but something better, a home, a family, a legacy that would endure. As full darkness fell, they went inside to help put the children to bed. This had become a cherished ritual, each child getting individual attention and a good-night kiss from both parents. Thomas, nearly a man at 17, still tolerated the routine with good humor, though he protested that he was too old to be tucked in. Margaret, 14, wanted to hear about when she was a baby and what she had been like. Samuel, 11, asked philosophical questions about the nature of stars and whether they were really the souls of the departed looking down on the living. And Rose, at 5, just wanted one more story, one more song, one more drink of water, prolonging the moment before sleep claimed her. Finally, with all the children settled, Andrew and Beatrice retired to their own room. They undressed slowly, comfortable with each other's bodies after so many years of intimacy. In bed, they held each other close, talking softly about the day's events and plans for tomorrow. "I love you," Beatrice said, as she did every night. "Thank you for stopping that day. Thank you for staying. Thank you for every day we have had together." "I love you too," Andrew replied, as he always did. "Thank you for giving me a reason to stop running. Thank you for making me a husband and a father. Thank you for being my partner in all things." They fell asleep as they had for 17 years, wrapped in each other's arms, secure in their love and the life they had created together. The new century dawned on January 1st, 1900, and the Turner family celebrated with their neighbors and friends in Delta. There was a sense of excitement and possibility in the air, a feeling that the 20th century would bring progress and prosperity. Andrew, watching his children's faces light up with wonder at the fireworks and festivities, hoped they were right. Thomas was 18 now, a man by any measure, tall and strong and capable. He had taken on more and more responsibility at the ranch, and Andrew knew it would not be long before his son was running things himself. Margaret, at 15, had received a scholarship to attend a teaching college in Laramie, a testament to her intelligence and dedication. She would leave in the fall, the first of their children to venture into the wider world, and while Andrew would miss her terribly, he was proud beyond words. Samuel, at 12, was still finding his path, but his love of learning and natural curiosity suggested he might become a scholar or scientist. And Rose, just turned 6, was too young to know what she might become, but her fierce independence and joyful spirit reminded Andrew so much of Beatrice that he smiled whenever he looked at her. The years from 1900 to 1905 were years of transition and bittersweet change. Margaret went off to college and thrived, writing long letters home about her studies and the new ideas she was encountering. She met a young teacher named John who shared her passion for education, and in the summer of 1903, she brought him home to meet the family. Andrew was prepared to be skeptical of any man who wanted to court his daughter, but John proved to be earnest and kind, clearly devoted to Margaret. They were married the following year in a simple ceremony at the ranch, and Andrew walked his daughter down the makeshift aisle with tears in his eyes, simultaneously happy for her and mourning the little girl who used to draw pictures at the kitchen table. Thomas, meanwhile, had fallen in love with a neighbor's daughter, a spirited young woman named Catherine who could ride and rope as well as any man. Andrew approved wholeheartedly, recognizing in Catherine the same strength and determination that had drawn him to Beatrice. Thomas and Catherine were married in 1905, and they built a small house on the eastern edge of the ranch property, planning to raise their own family while continuing to work the Turner land. Samuel surprised everyone by announcing his intention to study law. He had been accepted to university back east, an opportunity that Andrew and Beatrice encouraged despite the pain of having their son move so far away. They knew Samuel would make them proud, and they were right. He excelled in his studies and would eventually return to Wyoming to practice law in Cheyenne, advocating for fair treatment of small ranchers and homesteaders. Rose remained at home, the baby of the family, even as she grew into a confident young girl. She shared Thomas's love of ranch life, but also inherited Samuel's intellectual curiosity, asking endless questions about everything from why the sky was blue to what happened to a person's soul after death. Andrew and Beatrice marveled at how different each of their children was, yet how all of them carried the values their parents had worked so hard to instill. By 1906, Andrew was 54 years old and Beatrice was 50. They were no longer young, and the years of hard physical labor had left their marks. Andrew's old injury bothered him more in cold weather, and Beatrice's hands ached sometimes from arthritis. But they were still strong, still active, still devoted to each other and the ranch they had built. One morning in June of that year, almost exactly 24 years after Andrew had first ridden up to find Beatrice mending fences alone, they walked out to that same stretch of boundary fence together. It had been repaired and maintained countless times over the years, but it was still there, still marking the edge of their property. "You remember?" Andrew asked, running his hand along the weathered wood. "Every detail," Beatrice said. "I remember thinking what a strange man you were, offering to help for no reason. I remember being suspicious and hopeful and attracted to you all at once. I remember how right it felt to work beside you, even though we had just met. I remember thinking you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen," Andrew said. "Covered in dust and sweat, with a hammer in your hand and determination in your eyes. I fell in love with you that first day, though it took me a while to admit it to myself." "We have built a good life," Beatrice said, looking out across the land they had worked so hard to maintain and improve. "A very good life." "The best life," Andrew corrected. "I would not change a single thing, Beatrice. Not one moment of hardship, not one day of doubt. It all led us here to this place together." They held hands as they walked back to the house, moving a little slower than they once had, but still steady, still strong. Inside, Rose was practicing her letters at the kitchen table, her tongue sticking out slightly in concentration. She looked up when her parents entered and beamed at them, her smile so full of innocent joy that Andrew felt his heart swell. This was the true measure of success, he thought. Not the size of their herd or the value of their land, but the love that filled their home. The children they had raised to be good, capable people. The partnership he and Beatrice had forged through years of mutual respect and devotion. The knowledge that they had built something lasting, something that would endure long after they were gone. The years continued to pass, as they always did. Thomas and Catherine had their first child, a boy they named Andrew Thomas, and watching his son hold his grandson, Andrew felt the circle of life complete itself in the most satisfying way. Margaret and John had twin girls, precocious and bright like their mother. Samuel sent letters from the East detailing his studies, and his growing conviction that the law could be a tool for justice if wielded by the right hands. And Rose grew into a beautiful young woman, strong and independent like her mother, kind and thoughtful like her father. She had her pick of suitors, but she was in no hurry to marry, preferring to help run the ranch and pursue her own interests. Andrew and Beatrice did not push her, remembering how they had each come to their partnership when the time was right. In 1910, Andrew and Beatrice celebrated their 28th wedding anniversary. The ranch was now run primarily by Thomas, with Andrew serving as advisor and occasional laborer when his body allowed. It was a strange but not unpleasant experience, stepping back and watching the next generation take over. Andrew had feared he might resent the loss of control, but instead he found it liberating, giving him more time to spend with Beatrice and watch his grandchildren grow. They took walks together most evenings, sometimes in comfortable silence and sometimes talking about memories of the past or hopes for the future. Andrew's hair had gone completely gray, and Beatrice's face bore the lines of age and hard living, but to Andrew she was as beautiful as ever. More so, perhaps, because every line told a story, every gray hair marked a year of their shared life. One evening as they walked, Beatrice suddenly stopped and looked at Andrew with an expression of pure contentment. "I want you to know something," she said. "I have been thinking about it a lot lately. When I die and before you protest, we are both getting old and it is something we need to think about when I die. I will die completely satisfied with the life I have lived. I have known true love, not once but twice, though what I felt for Thomas was a pale shadow of what I feel for you. I have raised 4 children who make me proud. I have built something lasting and meaningful. I have no regrets, Andrew. None at all. Andrew felt tears prick his eyes. You better not be planning on dying anytime soon, he said roughly. I am not ready to lose you. I am not planning anything, Beatrice assured him. I am just saying that when the time comes, whenever that might be, I will be at peace, and I wanted you to know that. I wanted you to understand that you gave me more than I ever dreamed possible. That morning you rode up and offered to help, you gave me back my life. You gave me hope and love and purpose. You gave me everything. You gave me just as much, Andrew said, pulling her close. More. You gave me a reason to stop running. You gave me a home and a family. You showed me what it means to be a man, not through violence or dominance, but through partnership and devotion. Everything good in my life came from you. They held each other as the sun set. 2 people who had weathered decades together and emerged with their love not diminished but deepened. When they finally walked back to the house, Rose was on the porch with a young man Andrew recognized as one of the hands from the neighboring ranch. Who is that? Andrew whispered to Beatrice. His name is Henry, Beatrice whispered back. He has been courting her for about 3 months now. She did not want to say anything until she was sure. Andrew watched the young couple, noting the way Rose's face lit up when she looked at Henry, the protective gentleness in the young man's posture. It reminded him powerfully of himself and Beatrice all those years ago, and he felt a pang of bittersweet recognition. His baby girl was grown up, finding her own path, falling in love. It was what he wanted for her, of course, but it still hurt a little to realize she would not need her parents the way she once had. They remind me of us, Beatrice murmured, echoing his thoughts. They do, Andrew agreed. Should I go give him the stern father speech about treating her right? I think Rose is perfectly capable of making sure she is treated right, Beatrice said with amusement. She learned from the best, after all. She watched how you treated me all her life. She knows what real respect and love look like. She would not settle for anything less. Andrew felt a surge of pride at his wife's words. This was perhaps their greatest achievement, he realized. Not the successful ranch or the financial security they had built, but the example they had set for their children. Thomas and Catherine had a partnership based on mutual respect and shared work. Margaret and John supported each other's dreams and ambitions. Even Samuel, still unmarried, approached his relationships with women as equals. And now Rose, their youngest, knew her own worth and would accept nothing less than genuine love and respect. The cycle continued. Rose married Henry in the spring of 1911, a joyous occasion that brought the entire Turner clan together. All 4 children and their families gathered at the ranch, along with neighbors and friends from across the territory. It was a 3-day celebration of not just Rose's marriage, but of everything the Turner family represented: hard work, integrity, love, and community. As Andrew danced with Beatrice at the wedding, his grown children and numerous grandchildren surrounding them, he was struck by the enormity of what they had built together. It had started with a simple offer of help on a June morning nearly 3 decades earlier. 2 lonely people finding unexpected connection over fence posts and wire. And from that small beginning had grown this: a family, a legacy, a ripple effect of love and values that would extend down through generations. "What are you thinking about?" Beatrice asked, her head resting on his shoulder as they swayed to the music. "I am thinking about that first fence line we mended together," Andrew said. "How if I had ridden past that day, none of this would exist? All these people are children, our grandchildren, even the ones married into the family. They all exist because I decided to stop and offer help to a widow working alone. I think about that sometimes too, Beatrice admitted. How different my life would have been if you had not stopped. I probably would have lost the ranch eventually. I definitely would have been alone. I might have become bitter and hard, worn down by years of solitary struggle. Instead, you became this, Andrew said, pulling back to look at her face, still beautiful to him despite the years. The matriarch of a family, beloved by your children and respected by everyone who knows you. A woman who has everything she ever wanted. Because you stopped, Beatrice said. Because you saw someone who needed help and you offered it with no expectation of reward. That is who you are, Andrew. That is why I fell in love with you. Not because you were handsome or charming, though you were those things too, but because you were genuinely kind, genuinely good. You still are. They danced the rest of the evening away, celebrating their youngest daughter's happiness and their own good fortune. When the party finally wound down in the early hours of the morning, Andrew and Beatrice walked slowly back to their house, holding hands in the darkness. The years from 1911 to 1915 were peaceful ones, a gentle slope into old age for Andrew and Beatrice. The ranch continued to thrive under Thomas's capable management, and they were blessed with more grandchildren as each of their children's families grew. Andrew, now in his 60s, spent his days offering advice when asked and playing with his grandchildren. He taught them to ride, to rope, to read the signs of weather and season. He told them stories of the old days, of how their grandmother had been mending fences alone when he rode up and offered to help forever. Beatrice, for her part, became the anchor of the family, the one everyone turned to for wisdom and comfort. She wrote long letters to Margaret and Samuel, maintaining strong connections despite the distance. She helped Catherine with the children and taught Rose how to manage a household while also maintaining her own identity. She was the living proof that a woman could be strong and gentle, capable and feminine, that there was no contradiction between doing hard work and having a soft heart. In June of 1915, on the 33rd anniversary of their first meeting, Andrew and Beatrice returned once more to that stretch of fence line where it had all begun. They were both old now, Andrew 63 and Beatrice 59, their bodies marked by age and hard living. But they were still together, still in love, still partners in all things. 33 years, Andrew said, running his hand along the fence. This particular section has been replaced at least a dozen times, but it is still the same fence line, same purpose, same place. Like us, Beatrice said. We have changed and grown and weathered storms, but we are still the same people who met here all those years ago, still working together, still building something that lasts. I meant what I said that first day, Andrew reminded her. I wanted to help forever. And I have. I will continue to as long as I have breath in my body. I know, Beatrice said, taking his hand. And you have kept that promise every single day. You have helped me with the physical work of running this ranch, yes. But more than that, you have helped me carry the burdens of life. The worries, the sorrows, the hard decisions. You have been my partner in the truest sense of the word. They stood together in silence, looking out over the land that had been their shared kingdom for more than 3 decades. The grass waved in the breeze, the cattle grazed peacefully in the distance, and somewhere nearby they could hear the laughter of their grandchildren playing. It was a scene of such profound peace and contentment that Andrew felt his throat tighten with emotion. If I could go back, he said quietly, and speak to the man I was before I met you, that lonely drifter with no home or purpose, I would tell him to keep riding. Keep going, no matter how tired you are or how hopeless you feel. Because there is a woman mending fences alone in Wyoming, and she is waiting for you. She does not know it yet, and neither do you, but she is your destiny. She is your home. She is everything you have been looking for without knowing what it was. And if I could speak to the woman I was, Beatrice said, her voice equally soft, that widow working alone, convinced her life would never be anything but loneliness and struggle, I would tell her to have faith. To keep working, keep hoping. Because a cowboy is going to ride up one morning and offer to help. And when he does, you should say yes. You should take a chance on him, because he will give you back your life. He will give you more love than you thought possible. He will give you everything. They kissed there by the fence line. Two old people who loved each other as much after 33 years as they had after 3 days or 3 months. Then they walked back to the house together, moving slowly but steadily, still side by side after all these years. Andrew Turner and Beatrice Turner would have 8 more good years together. They would watch all their grandchildren grow and thrive, and they would meet several great-grandchildren as well. The Turner Ranch would continue to prosper, becoming one of the most respected operations in all of Wyoming, known not just for quality livestock, but for the integrity and values of the family that owned it. In the spring of 1923, Andrew developed a persistent cough that worsened into pneumonia. He was 71 years old, and his body, worn by decades of hard work, could not fight off the infection. Beatrice nursed him devotedly, just as she had done everything else for 41 years, with complete dedication and love. All their children came home, gathering around Andrew's bedside with their own children, 3 generations of Turners united in love and concern. On a warm May evening, with Beatrice holding his hand and his family surrounding him, Andrew Turner slipped peacefully away. His last words were for his wife. "Still the most beautiful woman I ever saw," he whispered. "Still mending fences. I love you. I will wait for you." Beatrice grieved deeply, as anyone would after losing a life partner of 4 decades, but she did not fall apart. Andrew had given her strength to face anything, and she honored his memory by continuing to live fully. She remained active in the ranch's operations, offering wisdom and guidance to Thomas and the younger generation. She traveled to visit Margaret and Samuel, spent time with Rose and her growing family. She wrote her memoirs, leaving a detailed account of her life and love for future generations of Turners to read and learn from. Beatrice Zimmerman Turner lived for 7 more years after Andrew's death, long enough to see the ranch celebrated on its 50th anniversary, long enough to hold several more great-grandchildren, long enough to know with certainty that everything she and Andrew had built would endure. She died peacefully in her sleep in the summer of 1930, at the age of 74, in the bed she had shared with Andrew for so many years. She was buried next to her husband on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a simple headstone that read, "Beatrice Zimmerman Turner, 1856-1930. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, she built something that lasts." Andrew's headstone, equally simple, read, "Andrew Turner, 1852-1923. Beloved husband, father, grandfather, he stopped to help and stayed forever." The Turner Ranch continued for generations after them, passed down through Thomas and his descendants, always maintained with the same values and dedication that Andrew and Beatrice had instilled. The fence line where they first met became something of a family shrine, maintained with special care, and pointed out to each new generation with the story of the widow mending fences alone and the cowboy who rode up and said, "Let me help forever." And that is what he did. Andrew Turner helped Beatrice for the rest of his life, and through the legacy they built together, he continued helping her even after death. Their love story became legend in Wyoming, told and retold by children and grandchildren, by neighbors and townspeople. It became a reminder that sometimes the most important decisions we make are the ones that seem smallest at the time, stopping to offer help, accepting that help, taking a chance on love. The story of the widow and the cowboy was ultimately a story about the power of choosing love over loneliness, partnership over isolation, hope over despair. It was about how two damaged, lonely people found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. It was about how the simple decision to stop and offer help could change not just two lives but generations of lives that followed. In the end, Andrew Turner did exactly what he said he would do that June morning in 1882. He helped forever, in all the ways that mattered. He helped mend fences and build barns and raise cattle. But more importantly, he helped mend a broken heart, helped build a family, helped raise children who would carry forward the values of love and partnership and dedication. He gave Beatrice everything she thought she had lost, and she gave him everything he had been searching for without knowing what it was. Their story reminded everyone who heard it that love is not always about grand romantic gestures or dramatic declarations. Sometimes the deepest love begins with someone simply showing up and saying, "Let me help." And if you are very lucky and very wise, that help will last not just for a day or a week or a year, but truly forever, echoing down through generations, a legacy of love that time cannot diminish. The fence line where they met still stands on Turner Ranch, now maintained by Andrew and Beatrice's great-great-grandchildren. When asked why they take such special care of that particular section of fence, they smile and tell the story of the widow who was mending fences alone and the cowboy who rode up and said he would help forever. And then he did, in every way that mattered, for the rest of his life and beyond. It was a promise kept, a love honored, a life well lived. It was everything that really mattered, distilled down to its essence. Two people, working side by side, building something that would last forever.